The mountain villagers warned us about the storms. They said sometimes people disappear up there, not because they lose the trail, but because the mountain refuses to let them leave. I still think about her whenever winter comes. Whenever snow falls quietly outside my window, I remember the girl from the mountain. It happened 3 years ago.
Back then, I joined a small trekking group traveling through the northern mountains during early winter. There were 6 of us. The locals warned us not to continue higher once the weather changed, but we ignored them. Because the sky looked clear that morning, and people always think disasters announce themselves before arriving. They don't. Sometimes they arrive quietly, like death walking through snowfall. By evening, the storm hit. The wind became violent so suddenly that we could barely see each other anymore. Snow swallowed the trail beneath our feet. Someone shouted for us to stay together, but panic spreads fast in places where nature reminds you how small you are. I slipped near the edge of a frozen slope. I remember tumbling downward into darkness. Then, silence. Just before losing consciousness, I heard a soft voice near me. I opened my eyes slightly and saw a girl struggling to pull me through the snow. The storm howled around us, and before I could understand what was happening, everything faded into darkness again. When I woke up, I was lying beside a fireplace. The sound of crackling wood echoed softly through a small cabin. Outside, the storm still screamed against the walls. For a moment, I thought I was dead. Then, I saw her.
She was sitting near the window, holding a lantern. A girl around my age. Quiet eyes. Long, dark hair. A thick wool sweater, slightly too large for her. She looked relieved when she noticed I was awake. "You're lucky," she said softly. "Another hour out there, and the mountain would have kept you." I tried to stand. Pain exploded through my leg immediately. "You fell pretty badly," she said. "You shouldn't move yet." Over the next few days, the storm never stopped. The snow outside grew deeper and deeper until the world beyond the cabin disappeared completely. The cabin itself was old. Wooden walls, dim lantern light, a tiny kitchen, an old piano covered with dust. No electricity, no signal, nothing except snow and silence. At first, talking to her felt awkward. She was strangely quiet, like someone who hadn't spoken to another person in a very long time. But eventually, silence became comfort. She made tea every morning while snow drifted past the windows. Sometimes I'd catch her staring outside for long periods, as if waiting for someone. Other times, she'd smile at me for no reason at all. And slowly, without realizing it, I started falling in love with her. Not because she saved my life, but because for the first time in years, I felt peaceful. One night, while the wind shook the cabin walls, I asked her why she lived so far away from everyone else. She stayed silent for a moment. Then she looked into the fire and said quietly, "Some people get left behind by the world." I didn't know why, but hearing that made my chest hurt. She knelt beside me and carefully cleaned the wound on my leg. Her hands were cold, softened by the winter air, yet strangely comforting. For reasons I couldn't explain, the pain began fading beneath her touch. After cleaning the wound on my leg, she quietly set the bandages aside and told me dinner was ready. The storm outside had finally softened, but snow still drifted endlessly beyond the windows.
I ate beside the fireplace while the storm whispered against the cabin walls. She sat quietly near the flames, occasionally adding small logs to the fire as warm light flickered across her face. Most of the conversation was small, simple things, but somehow, even silence felt warm around her. When dinner was over, she carried the empty bowls to the kitchen before slowly walking toward the old piano resting near the corner of the cabin. Dust covered most of its surface, yet somehow it still worked. She sat down quietly and pressed the keys with careful fingers. Soft music filled the cabin. Slow, gentle, almost like she was afraid the melody might disappear if she played too hard. I remember sitting there in silence listening to her while snow tapped softly against the windows. And somewhere during that moment, without realizing it, I had already fallen in love with her.
Days turned into weeks. My legs slowly healed, and the more time passed, the stranger certain things began to feel. I never once saw another person near the mountain, never saw footprints outside, except mine. She never mentioned her family, never talked about the future, and she always became uncomfortable whenever I asked about the nearby village. But whenever I started questioning things, she'd smile softly at me, and somehow I'd forget. Maybe because part of me didn't want answers. One evening, the storm finally cleared. For the first time in weeks, sunlight touched the mountains again. I knew I had to return to my trekking crew. They were probably searching for my body by now. That night felt strangely heavy, like both of us understood something neither wanted to say aloud. Before I left, she wrapped a dark scarf around my neck. "So you won't freeze again," she whispered. I remember wanting to tell her not to stay there alone anymore. I wanted to ask her to come back with me, but something about her expression stopped me. Instead, I just promised her one thing. I'll come back for you. For the first time since meeting her, she looked genuinely sad. The hike back down the mountain took hours. Eventually, I found my crew at a rescue station near the village. When they saw me alive, they looked like they'd seen a ghost. They told me they'd searched for me for nearly 2 weeks before giving up hope. 2 weeks! But that wasn't possible. I had spent almost a month in the cabin. I told them everything about the girl, about the cabin in the mountains, about how she saved me. At first, they thought I was delirious from the cold. But the next morning, I convinced them to follow me back there. I remember smiling during the climb, because for some reason, I was excited for them to meet her. But when we finally reached the place where the cabin should have been, my body went cold. The cabin was gone. Or at least, what remained of it. The roof had collapsed years ago. Wooden walls broken apart beneath thick snow. The windows shattered. The entire place looked abandoned for a very long time. "No one could live here," one of my crew members whispered. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. I kept telling them this was impossible. I had slept there. I had spoken to her. I had touched those walls with my own hands. Then I saw it. Hanging from a broken piece of wood near the entrance was the lantern she used every night. Rust covered its surface, like it had been untouched for years. Something inside me started shaking. Later that evening, we asked the villagers about the cabin. The moment we described the girl, the room became silent. An old man sitting near the fire looked at me carefully. Then he said words I still haven't forgotten. A father and daughter used to live there. They died during a mountain storm 6 winters ago. I
felt numb. The old man explained that rescue teams found the father buried beneath the snow near the cabin, but the daughter's body was never recovered. Some villagers believed the mountain kept her. Others believed she stayed behind, waiting for help that never came. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment with her in my mind. Her smile, her voice, the way she looked outside the window whenever snow fell. Then suddenly, I remembered something that made my blood run cold. Not once, during all those weeks, did I ever see her eat. A few days later, before leaving the village, I climbed the mountain alone one last time. Snow was beginning to fall again. The ruined cabin stood silently beneath the gray sky. I walked inside carefully.
Everything was frozen and covered in dust. And there, near the fireplace, I found something buried beneath broken wood. A small notebook. Most pages were ruined by time, but one sentence remained readable, written in faded ink. I hope the storm spares him this time. My hands started trembling because the date written beneath it was from 6 years ago. I don't fully understand what happened on that mountain. Maybe loneliness can leave echoes behind. Maybe love can. Or maybe some souls simply aren't ready to disappear. But sometimes, late at night, when winter storms hit my city, I still hear soft knocking against my window. And for a brief moment, through the falling snow, I see her standing there, smiling gently, like she's still waiting for me to come back.